When I look back now, I realize I had ignored my instincts from the very beginning. I had convinced myself that starting over in Portland was supposed to feel strange, that maybe the uneasiness in my stomach was just the weight of newness. After all, I had just uprooted my life. I'd left behind the cramped apartment in Salem where I'd raised Lily on my own for the better part of 8 years. Now at 32, I thought I was finally finding something steadier. A fresh start. A little rental house on Maplewood Drive with enough space for Lily and for Mark, my boyfriend, who had been gently nudging me toward living together. The house itself wasn't much to brag about. White paint already peeling on the trim, an overgrown yard, windows with locks that looked as if they belonged in a museum. But it was cheap, close to my new job at a bookstore downtown, and Lily had her own room with a pink ceiling she insisted made it feel like a princess castle. For the first week, it was almost nice. Quiet. Too quiet, maybe. That's when I met Tom Keller, the neighbor on our right. He was in his mid-40s, thinning hair, always wearing the same gray sweatshirt no matter the weather. The first time I saw him, I was hauling groceries from the car. He leaned on the fence with a cigarette and said, "Heavy bags for a pretty girl." His voice was calm, almost too calm, the kind of tone that made me unsure whether it was a compliment or something else. I gave him a polite smile and kept walking. Later, when I told Mark, he just shrugged, probably just lonely. Guys like that don't know how to talk to people. But the more I saw Tom, the more it unsettled me. He always seemed to be outside when I pulled into the driveway, watching. Not a friendly wave and go back to your business kind of neighborly thing, but a lingering stare. He asked too many questions. Where you work? What time you usually get home? He even asked what grade Lily was in. I lied, telling him she was older, just so he wouldn't know too much. Mark said I was overreacting, but my instincts told me otherwise. I'd lived enough years on my own to know when someone was paying attention in a way that wasn't normal. The first time something truly strange happened was 2 weeks in. We came home from a late grocery run and the back door was cracked open. I froze in the doorway, clutching Lily's hand. Mark brushed past me, checked the kitchen, then said, "I must have forgotten to lock it." But I knew I hadn't even opened that door all week. And when I looked closer, I saw dents in the frame near the lock as if someone had tried to force it. That night, I pushed a chair against the doorknob and slept with Lily in my bed. Mark teased me for being dramatic, but I couldn't shake the crawling sensation that someone had been inside. Over the next few days, it got worse. Little things disappeared. A pair of earrings, one of Lily's stuffed animals, Mark's watch. At first, I thought maybe we were misplacing things in the chaos of moving, but they would reappear in the oddest places. My earrings in the bathroom sink, Lily's toy under the porch, the watch tucked into the cereal box. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, but deep down I knew someone was in the house when we weren't. The morning I found the greasy handprint on the inside of my bedroom mirror, my stomach turned so violently I had to sit on the floor. I hadn't been near that mirror all week. Mark swore he hadn't either. That meant someone else had been. Someone close enough to touch the glass where I put on makeup every morning. I started locking every window, double-checking doors even though the locks were weak. When I mentioned replacing them, Mark frowned. "It's a rental. We can't just start drilling in new locks." "What do you suggest then? Pretend nothing's happening?" I snapped. He rubbed his neck. "I'm saying maybe you're stressed from the move. People misplace stuff. Mirrors get smudges. It doesn't mean we're in danger." But I knew what I'd seen. One afternoon, while taking out the trash, I noticed something sticking out of Tom's garbage bin. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled out the torn bag. Inside were crumpled receipts with my name, one of Lily's missing t-shirts, and a pair of leggings I hadn't been able to find for a week. At the very bottom was a bent metal tool with an oily sheen, shaped perfectly for prying a latch. I felt my hands go cold. That evening, I confronted him across the fence. "Your trash?" I demanded, holding up the shirt. "Why do you have my daughter's clothes in?" He smiled, slow and unbothered. "Anyone could just take them. Maybe you dropped them. You should be more careful." The casualness of his tone was worse than anger, like he wanted me to know, like it was all a game. I called the police that night. 2 officers came, listened politely, then went next door to talk to him. When they returned, their expressions were neutral. He says he doesn't know anything about your belongings. Without solid proof, there's not much we can do. He's lying, I said, voice shaking. One officer sighed. We'll file a report. Just keep your doors locked. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside made me sit up straight. I checked Lily's room 3 times, pulled her blanket up tight, and kissed her forehead, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. 2 nights later, Mark was out with friends and I was alone with Lily. Around 9, I heard boots crunching on the gravel outside. At first, I thought maybe Mark had come home early, but then I saw 3 figures near the porch, men I didn't recognize. One carried a crowbar. I grabbed Lily, whispered, "Stay quiet," and rushed her through the back door. Barefoot, we ran across the yard to the neighbor on the opposite side. I pounded on their door until Mrs. Harris, a retired widow, pulled it open. I must have looked wild-eyed, clutching Lily in my arms. "Call the police," I gasped. By the time the officers arrived, the men were gone, but muddy boot prints led straight back toward Tom's yard. "Coincidence?" Tom told them smoothly. "People cut through my property all the time. No arrests, just another report." Mark finally started to believe me after that, though he didn't say so out loud. He kept insisting we should wait it out, but the lines around his mouth tightened whenever I mentioned Tom's name. Meanwhile, Lily couldn't sleep without the light on. She started crying at night, asking, "What if he comes in again?" And I didn't know how to answer. "Mom." By the end of the week, I was unraveling. I jumped at shadows, flinched at footsteps. I caught Tom staring through his blinds when I walked to the mailbox. He never looked away, not even when I glared back. Mark tried to soothe me. "Soon. We can't just break the lease. We don't have money to move again, so I don't care about the lease," I said, my voice cracking. "Safe. I care about Lily. I care about us being." The final straw came one evening when I went out to grab the trash bin. Sticking from Tom's can was a folded piece of paper with my name written in block letters, Rachel. Inside was a single sentence, scrawled in uneven handwriting. "I like watching you when you sleep." My knees nearly buckled. I showed Mark, who finally stopped arguing. He packed a bag that night. We left before the sun came up, our car loaded with whatever we could fit. Lily slept in the back seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I didn't look back at the little white house or at Tom's yard, though I could feel his eyes even in memory. We turned in the keys to the landlord, breaking the lease. Money was tight for months, but I didn't care. Peace of mind was worth more than any deposit. It's been years now, and sometimes I still dream of greasy fingerprints on my mirror or the sound of boots on gravel outside the window. But more than fear, I carry a lesson. When your instincts tell you something is wrong, listen. Too often we're pressured to downplay danger, to convince ourselves we're imagining things. But safety is worth more than politeness, worth more than pride. Rachel's story is a reminder that ignoring the small signs can lead to devastating consequences, and that protecting yourself and your loved ones should always come first. I've always been the kind of person who sees change as a fresh canvas. When I graduated with my art history degree in 2018, I told myself Denver was going to be my city. I grew up in a small town in northern New Mexico, where opportunities were scarce and the art scene was limited to craft fairs and dusty galleries off the highway. When I landed my first real job at a museum in Denver, I packed everything into my old Corolla: canvases, paints, a mattress I tied down badly on the roof, and headed north with the kind of nervous excitement that comes from believing your life is finally beginning. The problem was rent. Downtown Denver was unforgiving. A shoebox studio ran more than half my paycheck. I scoured listings and stumbled on a post. Roommate wanted, loft near Colfax, affordable, good vibe. It sounded almost too good. But when I met Kara Miller, the nursing student who lived there, my doubts disappeared. She was bubbly, confident, the kind of girl who lit up a room. She gave me a tour of the loft, tall ceilings, brick walls, wide windows overlooking the street, and I fell in love instantly. "You paint, right?" she asked, pointing to the canvases poking from my car. "Yeah, mostly at night. Keeps me sane." "Perfect. I'm gone a lot for rotations. You'll have the place to yourself." I signed the lease that afternoon. Moving in was messy, but Kara helped. She held the ladder as I strung fairy lights above my bed and offered opinions on which wall should hold my sketches. She seemed genuinely interested in my art, asking questions about brush techniques and color palettes. For the first time in months, I felt a little less alone. But soon after, Ethan appeared, Kara's boyfriend. He was tall, dark-haired, quiet. At first, he seemed polite. He'd fix a loose handle in the kitchen or carry heavy groceries up the stairs. I figured he was just around a lot because they were serious. But it didn't take long for me to notice how his eyes lingered too long when we spoke, or how his questions were always more personal than they should have been. "What time do you usually get home from work?" he asked once, leaning casually on the counter. "Depends, sometimes late." "Why?" "Just curious. It's a rough neighborhood." Another time, "Do you sleep with your door locked?" His tone was light, almost joking, but it chilled me. I laughed it off and changed the subject, but that uneasy feeling stayed with me. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he was just socially awkward. Maybe his interest in my life was harmless. But then I started noticing little things. My brushes, which I always cleaned and lined up carefully, would be slightly rearranged. My sketchbook left open to pages I hadn't shown anyone. And my favorite scarf, the one my mom had given me when I left for college, vanished. I searched every drawer, every laundry pile. Days later, it reappeared, folded neatly on my bed. When I told Kara, she laughed. "Nat, you're just scatterbrained. Between your job and painting all night, I'm not surprised you lose track of stuff." Maybe she was right, but in my gut, I felt something was wrong. It was November when the unease turned to fear. One night I woke around 3 in the morning. The room was dim, lit only by the street lamp glowing through the blinds. At first, I thought the sound that pulled me from sleep was just a dream. Then I heard it again. Slow, steady breathing that wasn't mine. My eyes adjusted, and that's when I saw him. Ethan, standing in my doorway, motionless, just watching. "Ethan," my voice cracked. He didn't answer. He stepped back, slipping into the shadows, and then I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall. I sat frozen for minutes before forcing myself out of bed. I locked the door and leaned against it until dawn. The next morning, I confronted Kara. He was in my room, watching me. Her expression was disbelief. "Nat, no, Ethan wouldn't do that. You must have been dreaming." I wasn't dreaming. I saw him. "You're stressed. New city, new job. It's probably affecting your sleep." She said it gently, but her tone carried a sharp edge, like she thought I was accusing her by accusing him. I wanted to argue more, but she wouldn't budge. By the end of the conversation, I found myself doubting what I'd seen. Maybe it was a shadow. Maybe exhaustion was messing with me. But my body remembered the fear. The weeks that followed were worse. One night, after returning from a late event at the museum, I unlocked my door to find all my unfinished canvases rearranged. They were propped against the wall, turned toward the bed like an audience, and on my pillow sat my missing scarf, the fabric reeking of cologne. Ethan's. My chest tightened so badly I could barely breathe. I gathered the canvases, shoved them back into the corner, and stuffed the scarf deep into my closet. When Kara got home, I tried to tell her again. "It's not my imagination, he's messing with my stuff." She folded her arms, but helpful. "You're making him sound like a creep, and he's not. He's been nothing helpful." I nearly laughed. "His cologne? Do you think it's helpful to leave my scarf on my bed sprayed with her face flushed?" "You need sleep, Nat." It was useless. I started locking my door every night, though the lock was flimsy. I pushed a chair against the handle too. Still, sleep became impossible. Every creak in the loft felt amplified. Every footstep in the hall made me hold my breath. One evening, Kara had a night shift at the hospital. I returned from work, exhausted, craving nothing but sleep. The loft was unusually quiet, and for a moment I let myself relax. When I opened my bedroom door, my breath stopped. Every wall was covered in photos, hundreds of them taped in neat rows. Some were screenshots from my Instagram, others candid shots taken around Denver, me walking near the museum, me drinking coffee at a cafe. But the worst were the ones clearly taken inside this loft. Me brushing my hair at the window, me asleep in bed. I staggered backward, my pulse thundering. That's when I heard him. Ethan's voice behind me, low and steady. "Beautiful when you don't know I'm looking." "You're so much more," I spun, but he was already stepping closer, his face calm, almost tender. Something primal took over. I bolted past him into the hall, heart slamming, and ran for the stairwell. I locked myself in and screamed until neighbors came. Someone called 911. By the time police arrived, Ethan was gone. I gave my statement to the officers, explaining everything: the late-night watching, the missing belongings, the photos. But without Ethan there, without physical evidence tying him to the images, they couldn't do much. "Do you have any of the photos?" an officer asked. "No. They were everywhere, but when I came back with the neighbors, they were gone." "Gone?" I nodded, tears spilling. "He must have taken them before the cops got here." Kara arrived not long after, her scrub still on. She listened, but her face hardened. "Ethan wouldn't do that. You're making him into some kind of stalker. He's not like that." I stared at her, disbelief choking me. "Photos. How can you not believe me?" "Kara, he was in my room. He covered my walls with..." She shook her head, muttering something about stress and paranoia. I packed that night. Leaving the loft felt like failure, but I didn't care. I left behind furniture, paintings, half my clothes. I carried only what I could fit in my car and drove aimlessly for hours before checking into a cheap motel. I called my parents, voice trembling, and told them everything. My mom cried. My dad wanted to drive to Denver that second. I begged them not to. Within a week, I found a sublet across town. Tiny, overpriced, but it had strong locks and neighbors who minded their own business. I didn't tell Kara my new address. For months, I jumped at shadows. If someone walked too close behind me, my body stiffened. At night, I double-checked every window, every door. I kept my paintings covered, unwilling to feel eyes on them. I never saw Ethan again, but sometimes I swear I feel him. When I paint late into the night and silence fills the room, I still glance at the door, half expecting to see him standing there, watching. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones we welcome into our homes under the guise of trust. Natalie's story reminds us that boundaries matter, that dismissing instinct in favor of politeness can be costly. Always believe the unease in your body. It's better to act on a warning sign and be wrong than to ignore it and be right too late. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who ran away from someone, but that's exactly what brought me to Dayton in the spring of 2022. My relationship had ended badly. Ugly arguments, slammed doors, the kind of betrayal that makes you feel like your whole foundation was a lie. After months of crying myself numb in the same apartment we had once shared, I finally decided I needed a clean slate. That's how I ended up on Westbrook Avenue, standing in front of a brick apartment building that looked older than me but carried the promise of quiet. The third-floor corner unit wasn't glamorous, but it had its charm. A little balcony overlooked the street, and the living room had a drafty window where I could sit with tea and grade papers. I told myself this was where I'd put myself back together, where I'd write again. Writing had always been the only place I felt in control. At first, life was simple. I walked to the high school where I taught English, spent afternoons scribbling story ideas in my notebook, and came home to solitude that felt healing instead of lonely. I even bought a set of plants for the balcony, herbs, succulents, anything green that didn't remind me of the past. But within weeks, little things began to gnaw at me. The blinds I swore I'd closed before bed were parted by morning. My bottle of perfume, which I kept neatly centered on my dresser, was shifted an inch. A stack of graded essays on the table was scattered like someone had rifled through them. I told myself it was exhaustion. My breakup had taken more out of me than I admitted. I was forgetful, distracted. That had to be it. Then, one Friday afternoon, I came home from school and saw it. The lock on my bedroom window cracked, the metal bent like someone had jammed a tool into it. My stomach dropped. I called the landlord, who came up half an hour later with a coffee in one hand and a key ring in the other. "It's just old hardware," he said, tapping the frame with his knuckle. "Standing since the 60s. Frames warp. Locks give out. Don't worry." "This building's been..." He replaced the latch with a shrug and left. But my gut screamed that something wasn't right. That night, I pushed my dresser against the window before crawling into bed. I told myself it was precaution, but really it was the only way I could fall asleep. The first time I thought I saw him, I convinced myself I was imagining things. I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone, the glow casting strange reflections on the wall. Out of the corner of my eye, my screen reflected something darker than the shadows, a figure standing in the corner of my room. I gasped, flicked on the lamp, and the corner was empty. My pulse hammered so hard I thought I'd faint. I told myself I'd been awake too long, my brain pulling tricks in the low light. 2 days later, I sat at my desk grading essays. A cup of lukewarm tea steamed beside me. For some reason, I glanced out the window across the street, and that's when I froze. In the top floor of the vacant building opposite mine, a man stood in the window. Tall, still, staring directly at me. I blinked, heart in my throat. The unit had been empty for months. When I first moved in, the landlord mentioned the top floor was sealed shut because of water damage. No one was supposed to be in there. I called him immediately. "There's someone in the vacant apartment across from me," I said, voice shaking. He sighed. "Olivia, no one's in there. Keys are locked up. It's been boarded for weeks." I saw him. "Stress," he said flatly. "You've been through a rough patch. Get some rest." I hung up, furious and terrified. That night, every sound in the building echoed in my bones. Pipes knocking, doors closing down the hall, footsteps overhead even though no one was supposed to live above me. At 2 a.m., just as I was drifting off, I heard it, faint tapping against my bedroom window. My breath caught. 3rd floor. Nothing should be able to reach my window. I inched toward the blinds, heart hammering. Slowly, I peeled them back. Nothing. Empty night, faint streetlight glow. But in the morning, when sunlight spilled across the glass, words appeared in the foggy condensation. Words written by a finger. "I like when you smile." I couldn't breathe when I saw it. My legs buckled, and I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the glass like it might spell something new. I called the police. They arrived an hour later, 2 officers who looked more bored than concerned. They searched the apartment, checked the windows, and found nothing. No forced entry, no footprints outside. "Maybe a prank," one officer said. "On the 3rd floor?" I snapped. "How would anyone reach my window?" He shrugged. "Could be condensation patterns. Stress can make things look different." The word stress made me want to scream. When they left, I pushed furniture against the door and sat up all night, eyes on the window. I wanted proof, something I could hold up and say, "See, I'm not imagining this." Days passed. I went through the motions at work, distracted, snappy with students. My colleagues noticed. "Rough week?" one asked. I nodded, but I didn't explain. How could I? "There's a man living in a vacant apartment watching me through the glass" sounded unhinged even to me. One Saturday, I decided to clean. Scrubbing gave me control. I stripped my bed, vacuumed under the couch, dusted every surface. When I dropped a notebook behind my bed, I cursed and bent down to grab it. My fingers brushed something cold. I pulled it out. A tiny black camera, wired, blinking red. The scream that tore out of me didn't even sound like my own voice. I bolted out of the apartment barefoot, clutching the camera in my hand. My neighbor across the hall cracked her door open, startled. "Are you okay?" "No," I choked out. "Someone's been in my apartment." I called the police again, shaking so badly I could barely dial. When they arrived, I shoved the device into their hands. "This is proof. He's been inside. He's watching me." The younger officer examined it, frowning. "Looks like a nanny cam." "It was under my bed," I shouted. "I live alone." They took notes, promised to look into it, but I saw the same skepticism in their eyes. Kicking the camera away from me wasn't enough. I couldn't stay another night. I stuffed clothes into a suitcase, grabbed my laptop, and left. I didn't even lock the door behind me. At a cheap motel off the highway, I sat on the bed staring at the faded carpet. Every time the pipes hissed or a door slammed down the hall, my chest seized. I didn't care about the rent I'd lose, the furniture I'd abandon. I just wanted out. I never went back to that apartment. I called the landlord, told him I was breaking the lease. He tried to argue, then gave up when I told him the police had been involved. I found a smaller unit across town. Overpriced, cramped, but it had new locks and thicker walls. The first night, I sat in bed with the lights on, hugging my knees, waiting for shadows that never came. But healing wasn't instant. Every time I caught movement in a window across the street, my heart spiked. Every time I left a notebook on my desk, I checked twice to see if someone had touched it. Writing, once my safe haven, became something I guarded. I no longer left my work scattered. I locked it in drawers. I never learned who the man was, or how long he had been slipping into my home. I never learned how he reached my third-floor window, or whether he was the figure in the vacant apartment staring at me through the glass. What I know is this: for weeks, maybe months, someone lived in the spaces I thought were mine alone, and he left only when I did. Safety is never something to take for granted. Locks, doors, and walls create the illusion of control, but vigilance and boundaries protect us more than bricks or glass. Olivia's story is a reminder that when instincts whisper that something is wrong, you must listen, because the danger of doubting yourself is far greater than the fear of being impolite or mistaken. I never thought a breakup would completely reshape the rhythm of my life, but that's exactly what happened in the summer of 2017. After 6 years with a man I thought I'd marry, I found myself packing my things into a handful of cardboard boxes and moving into a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Austin. The place wasn't much: thin walls, a kitchen that smelled faintly of the last tenant's cooking. But it was mine. I was 29, a marketing analyst, and the one thing I knew how to do was bury myself in work. I stayed at the office late, grinding through data reports and PowerPoint decks, pretending that exhaustion was better than loneliness. When I got home, I didn't have the energy to cook. Ordering food became a habit so fast I barely noticed it. Pad Thai on Mondays, pepperoni pizza on Wednesdays, sushi rolls on Fridays. It was comfort disguised as convenience. That's when I first met Ryan. The first time he showed up at my door, I didn't think twice. He was young, maybe mid-20s, tall and cheerful, in the way delivery drivers sometimes are when they're hustling for tips. "Long day?" he asked as he handed me a plastic bag full of takeout boxes. I nodded, fumbling for cash. He smiled wide, the kind of smile that felt practiced. The next week, there he was again. Different restaurant, same driver. "You must be busy," he said lightly. "Always working, huh?" His words were casual, but I remember pausing, wondering how he could possibly know what my schedule was like. I brushed it off, gave a polite laugh, and shut the door. Over time, though, he kept appearing. No matter what I ordered, no matter what app I used, it was always Ryan who showed up. Sometimes he carried the food with one hand, waving with the other like we were old friends. Sometimes he lingered for a beat too long, eyes flicking past me into the apartment as if he wanted to memorize the layout. "You've got a presentation tomorrow, don't you?" he said once, handing me a box of noodles. My stomach tightened. I had told no one, not even my coworkers, that I was nervous about presenting at the quarterly meeting. "How do you know that?" I asked, forcing a laugh. "You just look like someone who stays up late working. I notice things." Something in his tone unsettled me, but I smiled stiffly, thanked him, and closed the door. That night I told myself I was imagining things. Just a friendly delivery driver. Just coincidence. Still, when I got ready for bed, I found myself pulling the curtains tighter. I didn't know it then, but those small moments, the smile, the comments, the lingering at the door, were the first cracks in the wall between harmless convenience and something much darker. And once the cracks began, it didn't take long for the whole wall to collapse. The first strange delivery came on a Thursday. I hadn't ordered anything, but when I opened the door to leave for work, a paper bag sat on the mat. Inside was a burger and fries, still warm, the receipt tucked neatly into the side. My name wasn't on it, but I shrugged. Mistakes happened all the time. I left it on the counter and forgot about it. The next night, another bag appeared. This time a dessert box with a note inside. "You deserve a treat after a long day." I stared at the handwriting, neat block letters in black ink. My chest tightened. Nobody knew how long my days were. Nobody cared enough to leave me dessert. Nobody except Ryan. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the restaurant messed up. Maybe someone dropped it at the wrong apartment. But the following week, groceries appeared. Bread, milk, pasta. My name was written on the bag in the same tidy handwriting. That night I called my best friend Julia. "I think my delivery driver is, I don't know, watching me?" "You're kidding," she said. "What makes you think that?" I told her about the notes, the extra food. "That's not normal," she said firmly. "You need to call the police." "What am I supposed to say? Some guy brought me free cake and milk?" Julia sighed. "Need to be careful." "Hannah, listen to me. If he's crossing boundaries now, it won't stop here. I promised I would, but the truth was I brushed it off. It felt too small, too silly to make into a police matter. Then came the night I walked into my apartment and knew something was wrong. I dropped my bag on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and froze. On my dining table sat a plastic takeout box. The lid was closed, steam still clinging to the edges. But that wasn't what made my stomach lurch. Candles flickered beside it. My Bluetooth speaker hummed with soft music. I hadn't left it on. Every hair on my arm stood up. I backed into the hallway, heart hammering, eyes darting to the door. Locked. Windows locked. Nothing broken. Someone had been inside. My hands shook as I called Julia. "Apartment." "He was here," I whispered. "Someone was inside my call 911 right now." I did. Officers arrived, polite but dismissive. They walked the rooms, checked the locks, glanced at the food. "No sign of forced entry," one said with a shrug. "Could be a prank. Maybe you forgot to lock up." "I didn't," I said firmly, but he was already writing it off in his notes. They left, and I sat awake the entire night, the untouched food glowing faintly in the dark. That was when the fear took root, the kind that doesn't let you breathe right, the kind that makes you wonder what else you've missed. The next evening, as I sat curled on the couch scrolling my phone, my screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Don't ruin our date." My stomach dropped. I hadn't given my number to anyone new. My first thought was Ryan. But how did he get it? I jumped up, checking every lock again, every window. The apartment was silent, the air too still. I was about to call Julia when I turned back toward the couch. There was a bag sitting on it. I hadn't heard the door, hadn't heard anything. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was no food, just a photograph. It was me, taken the night before. Sitting on the same couch, phone in hand, completely unaware. I dropped the photo like it burned. I ran to the hallway, yanked open the door, scanned the hallway. Empty. My neighbor's doors were shut, the air heavy with silence. That night, I didn't stay. I grabbed a bag, stuffed it with clothes, and drove straight to Julia's apartment. She opened the door in her pajamas, eyes wide when she saw me shaking. "I told you," she whispered after I explained. "Any more? You have to go to the police again. This isn't small, so we did." At the station, I showed them the photo, the text, the bags. The detective frowned. "Do you know this man's last name?" "No," I admitted. "Just Ryan. He's a delivery driver." They promised to look into it, promised patrols, promised I'd be safe, but promises don't fill the silence when you're lying awake, imagining footsteps outside your door. I stayed with Julia for a week, avoiding my apartment. Each time I thought about going back, my stomach knotted. What if he was inside again? What if he was waiting? Still, leases don't break themselves. I had to return eventually. When I finally stepped back inside, the apartment looked the same. Clean, untouched, almost ordinary. But my eyes caught on the corner of the coffee table. Another photograph. This one was of me sleeping. I don't remember screaming, but Julia told me later she could hear me from the parking lot. I called the police again, this time demanding a detective. They came, studied the photo, asked the same questions: how he got in, whether I gave him a key, whether I was sure it was Ryan. "I'm not imagining this," I snapped. "He's been inside more than once." The detective nodded grimly. "We'll pull his records, see what we can find." In the meantime, I installed cameras. One by the front door, one in the living room, one in the bedroom. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some control. It didn't last. 2 nights later at 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. My stomach twisted as I opened the feed. There he was. Ryan, standing in the doorway of my living room, staring directly into the camera lens. He lifted his hand slowly. In it was a piece of paper. "Let me in." I scrambled for the phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. "He's here. He's inside." But when the sirens arrived minutes later, the apartment was empty. The detective's voice was low the next day. "You need to leave. Tonight. Stay with a friend, family, anyone. He's escalating, and we don't know what he's capable of." So I did. I packed a bag and left everything behind. The furniture, the curtains, even the cameras. I stayed at my sister's house for weeks, too afraid to even drive past the old building. By the time I broke the lease officially, Ryan had vanished. No arrests, no answers. Just an absence that felt more suffocating than his presence. It's been years since I left that apartment, but I still live with the echoes of it. I don't order delivery anymore. I don't eat takeout unless I pick it up myself. When a stranger smiles at me too warmly, I feel my pulse spike. Sometimes I tell myself he's gone, that maybe the police scared him off, or he moved away, or he found someone else to fixate on. Other nights, I lie awake staring at the window, convinced he's out there somewhere waiting for the right moment to reappear. I've rebuilt my life since then. New city, new job. I even live with a roommate now because silence is no longer comfort. It's a warning. But the memory of Ryan never fully leaves. It lingers in the corners of my mind, reminding me that sometimes danger doesn't kick down your door. Sometimes it smiles, hands you dinner, and waits for you to open the door again and again until it no longer needs to knock. The scariest threats are often the ones that don't look threatening at first. A smile, a kind word, a familiar face. These can be masks for dangerous intentions. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, take it seriously, no matter how small it seems. Boundaries exist for a reason, and ignoring them can invite danger into your life. Stay cautious, value your safety, and remember that protecting your peace is never an overreaction. When I think back to the summer of 2005, it feels like a strange mix of sunlight, scraped knees, and the kind of naive freedom you only get once in your life. I was 14, awkward in my own skin, always tugging at the sleeves of my t-shirts to hide my arms, convinced that everyone was staring at me even when they weren't. My parents had just decided I was old enough to ride my bike around the neighborhood in Astoria, as long as I promised not to cross the big intersection on Steinway Street or go too far from home. That bike was my treasure. A blue Schwinn with silver handlebars, stickers on the frame, and a squeaky bell I hardly ever used. Riding it felt like flying. I'd loop around the same blocks again and again, hair whipping across my face, music from the little CD player I tucked in my pocket when I dared. The city felt bigger when I was on that bike, like I was finally stretching out of childhood, taking small steps into independence. The first week was uneventful, just passing bodegas with their fruit stands spilling onto the sidewalks, the basketball courts where older kids played until dusk, the rows of red brick apartment buildings that all looked the same to anyone but the people who lived there. It was ordinary, and I loved it. Then I noticed him. The first time, it didn't seem strange. He was tall, maybe in his 40s, with thinning brown hair and a faded Mets cap. A golden retriever trotted beside him, tail wagging happily. He smiled when I rode past and said, "Nice bike." I smiled back, because that's what I had been taught to do. Be polite. Respect adults. Keep moving. The next day he was there again. Same dog, same spot on the corner near the old gas station that had been shut down for years. "Hot day, huh?" he said. I nodded and pedaled a little faster. After a few days, it became impossible not to notice. He was always there around the same time I went riding. His dog never barked, just watched me with its tongue hanging out. The man started asking small questions. "What school do you go to? How old are you? You live around here, don't you?" I wasn't good at lying, and my parents had raised me to answer adults respectfully, so I mumbled short replies and rode off before he could say more. At first, I thought maybe he was just friendly, like one of those neighbors who always waved. But something about the way his eyes followed me made my stomach twist. One afternoon, he stopped me with his words. "You know," he said, tugging the leash as his golden retriever sniffed the sidewalk, "there's a shortcut behind that old gas station. Leads straight to the mall, safer than the main road." I slowed my pedaling. I'd lived in Queens my whole life. I knew those streets like the back of my hand, and I knew for a fact there was no shortcut behind the gas station. His smile stretched wide, like he wanted me to believe him. My hands tightened on the handlebars. Something inside me screamed to keep moving, and I did, nodding politely before pedaling away as fast as I could. That night at dinner, I mentioned it offhand, the way kids do when they don't realize the weight of their own words. "Rice. Some guy keeps walking his dog near the gas station," I said, poking at He told me there's a shortcut to the mall, but I know there isn't. My mom froze mid-bite. My dad's fork clinked against his plate. "What guy?" my mom asked sharply. I shrugged. "Just some man, with a golden retriever." Her face hardened. "What did he say to you exactly?" I repeated the words, suddenly nervous at her reaction. "From now on," she said firmly, "you don't ride alone." I didn't understand then, but I would. The next afternoon, my mom insisted on walking with me. She put on her sneakers, tucked her hair into a baseball cap, and said she wanted some exercise. I knew better. This wasn't about fitness. This was about the man. Sure enough, he appeared. Same spot near the gas station, same golden retriever. His easy smile slipped when he saw my mother beside me. "Afternoon," he said casually, tugging the dog's leash. My mom's voice was sharp. "Why are you talking to my daughter?" He blinked, then chuckled like it was all a big misunderstanding. "Nice bike. My dog likes watching her ride by." "Just being friendly. She's got a don't talk to her again," my mom said. Her tone left no room for argument. His jaw tightened. For a moment, the smile vanished completely, and I saw something colder in his eyes, something that made my stomach drop. Then he muttered, "Fine," and pulled his dog away without another word. We walked home in silence. My mom's grip on my shoulder was firm, almost painful. That night, after I'd brushed my teeth and climbed into bed, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. Their voices were hushed, but urgent. "Registered sex offender?" my mom whispered, eventually. "He's been here for years. I told you he'd slip up." My dad's voice was tight. "And the cops can't do anything?" "Not unless he acts on it." That's what they told me. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, my heart pounding. The word sex offender echoed in my head. I didn't know the full weight of it, not really, but I knew enough. The next morning, I wasn't allowed to ride at all. "It's not safe," my mom said. "Not until we figure this out." The freedom I'd loved so much was gone overnight. My bike leaned against the wall by the door, untouched. Every time I glanced at it, I felt like I was being punished for something that wasn't my fault. At school, I told my best friend Lena. Her eyes widened. "That's so creepy. Did he, try to grab you?" "No," I admitted. "He just talks. But it doesn't feel right." She nodded solemnly. "Probably is. You have to trust that feeling. My mom says if something feels wrong, I wanted to believe that was enough, that listening to my instincts could protect me. But deep down, I knew the man wasn't finished. And I was right. The days blurred together after that. My mom shadowed me everywhere, her eyes scanning every corner of the street. The man stopped appearing at the gas station, but sometimes I thought I saw him in the distance, across the street near the laundromat, sitting on a bench by the deli, always with that golden retriever. He never approached again, not when my mom was around, but the way his eyes lingered made it clear the confrontation hadn't scared him off completely. One Saturday morning, I begged my mom to let me ride just once, promising I'd stay on our block. Reluctantly, she agreed, standing on the porch as I circled the street. The air was humid, my shirt sticking to my back, but I pedaled faster and faster, desperate for that old feeling of freedom. Then I saw him. He was leaning against a fence at the far end of the street, dog panting at his side. No smile this time, just watching. I froze. My mom must have noticed because she shouted my name, her voice sharp and urgent. I turned my bike so fast the tires squealed, racing back toward her. By the time she reached me, he was gone. That night, my parents sat me down. "Listen carefully," my dad said, his voice steady but serious. "If you ever see him again, you come straight home. Don't answer his questions, don't smile, don't engage. Do you understand?" I nodded, throat tight. It felt unfair, like he had stolen something from me without ever laying a hand on me. The streets I'd loved riding suddenly felt smaller, more dangerous. Every corner seemed like a trap. And though I never told anyone, I started to dream about him. Dreams where I was pedaling and pedaling, but no matter how fast I went, I couldn't outrun the sound of his footsteps or the jingle of the dog's collar. As summer wore on, the man seemed to fade into the background of the neighborhood. I'd catch glimpses of him here and there, but he never tried to talk to me again. My mom said it was because he knew we were watching now. Still, the damage was done. I no longer begged to ride my bike. The sight of him, even across the street, made my stomach twist. My independence had been snatched away in a matter of weeks, replaced by a sharp awareness I hadn't asked for. One afternoon, Lena came over. We sat on the stoop eating popsicles, and I told her everything. "That's messed up," she said. "You can't even ride your bike because of some creep." "I know," I muttered. She leaned closer. "But it's not your fault. Remember that." I nodded, though the guilt still lingered. That evening, as the sun dipped low, my mom and I walked to the corner store together. And there he was, turning the corner with his golden retriever, leash pulled tight. For the first time, I didn't look away. My mom's hand closed around mine. The man's eyes met hers, cold and unreadable. For a moment, it felt like time froze. Then he tugged the leash and disappeared down the block. We didn't speak until we were back home. My mom knelt in front of me, brushing hair from my face. "I need you to know something," she said. "People like him. They look normal. They smile, they act polite, but that doesn't make them safe. You can't always trust appearances. I swallowed hard and nodded. I understood then, in a way I hadn't before, that the world wasn't as safe as I'd thought. By the time school started again in September, the man with the dog was no longer a daily presence. I don't know if he moved, or if my parents' watchfulness scared him off, or if he simply found another routine. But the impact stayed with me. I didn't ride my bike around the neighborhood anymore. The freedom I'd once felt was replaced by caution, by the knowledge that sometimes danger doesn't look like danger until it's too late. Years later, as an adult, I drove through Astoria on my way to visit an old friend. The streets looked smaller, the gas station still boarded up, the basketball courts cracked and faded. I saw kids riding their bikes carefree and laughing, and for a moment, I envied them. As I passed a row of brick houses, I caught sight of a man walking a golden retriever. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, heart racing, even though I knew it couldn't be him after all these years. But the instinct remained, to look away, to speed up, to get as far from him as possible. That summer in 2005 taught me something I never forgot. Freedom can be fragile, and sometimes it only takes one stranger to steal it from you. Predators don't always appear dangerous at first. Sometimes they wear ordinary smiles, walk friendly dogs, and seem like harmless neighbors. But true safety comes from listening to your instincts, speaking up, and trusting the people who protect you. Never ignore the feeling that something isn't right, because often, that feeling is the warning that saves you. When I first moved to Seattle in the fall of 2015, everything felt like a fresh start. I had just turned 20, beginning my second year at the university, and I finally had my own space. A little dorm room in a building that always smelled like burnt coffee and printer ink. My parents had gone through a messy divorce the year before, and both of them wanted me to call often, to pick sides, to reassure them that I was okay. But being in Seattle gave me a sense of distance I didn't know I needed. I could lose myself in literature classes, quiet evenings in coffee shops, and long walks in the rain. I wasn't the kind of student who thrived at parties or made friends easily. My circle was small, my 2 roommates and a coworker from the bookstore down the street where I worked part-time. That job was my sanctuary. Dusty shelves, the smell of paper, and the comfort of categorizing stories while the city outside rushed past. So when Professor Laird announced we would be doing a semester-long group project, my stomach dropped. I hated group work. Too much relying on others. Too many awkward texts about who would do what. When he read my name out loud with Daniel Hartman's, I barely reacted. I didn't even know who Daniel was. He introduced himself after class, holding out his hand with a polite smile. He was tall, dark-haired, with that clean-cut look some guys have, the kind that makes you think of student government or debate teams. He spoke confidently, like he'd already rehearsed what he wanted to say. "Rachel, right? I've seen you in class. You always take really detailed notes." I felt myself blush. "Yeah, I guess." "Good," he said. "I'm organized too. This will be easy." At first, he really did seem like the dream partner. He offered to pull books from the library, emailed me detailed outlines of his thoughts, and even suggested we split the work evenly instead of letting one person carry the load. I remember telling my roommate, finally, someone who actually does their part. The first few study sessions were normal. We met in the library, laptops open, papers spread out, but I began to notice little things. The way he'd stare at me a second too long before answering. The way he always seemed to know when I was free, even before I said anything. He'd comment on my coffee order, on the way I doodled in the margins of my notes, on how I tucked my hair behind my ear when I was thinking. I brushed it off. Maybe he was just observant. But the texts started coming late at night. At first it was about the project. "Did you get through chapter 4? Do you want me to draft the outline?" Then it shifted. "That sweater you wore today looks nice. You always smile at the professor's jokes. It's cute." I'd reply with short answers, trying not to encourage him. thanks, or yeah, or sometimes nothing at all. But when I didn't answer, he'd follow up with, did I do something wrong? You seem distant. I told myself he was harmless, that maybe he just didn't know how to interact with people. But deep down, a small part of me felt uneasy. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. It was a Tuesday night when I first realized something was wrong. I had just finished a closing shift at the bookstore, my hands still smelling faintly of old paper and espresso from the cafe corner. I slung my backpack over my shoulder and walked out into the damp Seattle night. When I reached my dorm, I unzipped the bag to grab my keys and froze. Tucked neatly inside the outer pocket was a small notebook. It wasn't mine. I pulled it out, flipped it open, and felt my stomach clench. Every page was filled with handwriting I recognized. My handwriting, my doodles, my half-finished quotes, the little notes I'd scribbled in class. But it wasn't my notebook. It was his. Daniel had copied everything. And worse, in the margins, he'd added comments. We're the same. I understand you. No one else gets you like I do. My fingers went numb. He had been inside my bag. I didn't even want to imagine when or how. The next morning, I confronted him. We were sitting at a library table, and I placed the notebook between us. Why do you have this? He smiled calmly, like it was no big deal. Wanted to keep track. I just thought it was cute. You take notes like I do, You can't just go through my stuff. He tilted his head. Rachel, relax. It's not a big deal. You're overreacting. Something in his tone made me want to scream, but the library was too quiet, too public. People were watching. So I packed up my things and left without another word. That week, my social media accounts were hacked. My password stopped working, my email filled with alerts. And then the photos started circulating. Nothing scandalous, but personal. Me in pajamas on FaceTime with my mom, a snapshot I'd saved of me and my roommate watching a movie. Pictures I had never posted anywhere. My roommates assumed I'd been careless. You probably use the same password for everything, one of them said. I didn't correct her. I just locked myself in my room and changed every password I could think of. But in my gut, I knew who was behind it. After the notebook and the photos, I tried cutting Daniel off completely. No texts, no study sessions outside of class. I figured if I ignored him long enough, he'd get bored and move on. But silence didn't stop him. One Thursday night, I dragged myself back from the library after midnight. The hallway lights in my dorm flickered, and I felt heavy with exhaustion. But when I reached my door, I noticed it was slightly open. My heart raced. Inside, everything looked normal. Except on my desk, a single white rose, lying across my favorite book, the one I had been reading the night before. I backed out of the room so fast I nearly tripped. My roommate came down the hall asking what was wrong, but I couldn't speak. I just pointed. We called campus security. They checked the cameras. Down for maintenance. No record of anyone entering. When I told the officer I thought it was Daniel, he shook his head. He's a straight-A student, works with professors all the time. Are you sure you're not jumping to conclusions? The disbelief cut deeper than the fear. If no one believed me, what chance did I have? For weeks I slept with the lights on. I jumped at shadows. And still, I told no one outside my roommates. I didn't want to be labeled paranoid, but my silence didn't protect me. The turning point came on a rainy Saturday. I was walking back from my bookstore shift, umbrella useless against the wind. The streets were quiet, shiny with water, and every step echoed too loudly. Then I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I told myself it was just another student. But when I sped up, the footsteps did too. My chest tightened. I gripped my phone, ready to dial. Without thinking, I darted into a crowded diner, the bell over the door ringing sharply. The warmth of the room hit me like a wave. I slid into a booth, trying to calm my breathing. That's when I saw him. Through the rain-streaked window, Daniel stood outside. No umbrella, no jacket, just standing in the downpour, staring at me. His eyes didn't blink. His lips didn't move. He just watched. I felt my throat close. For the first time, I knew I wasn't safe. That night, I filed a police report. My voice shook as I described everything. The notebook, the hacked accounts, the rows, the footsteps. The officer nodded, took notes, and promised to look into it. But when the days passed, nothing happened. Daniel still came to class. He still smiled at people. And when I told my professor, she looked surprised. Daniel, he's one of my best students. I'm sure there's some misunderstanding. The isolation was worse than the fear. It felt like screaming into a void. Then, just as suddenly as it started, he disappeared. One week he was in class, raising his hand with answers, smiling like always. The next, his seat was empty. Rumors spread fast. Some said he transferred to another university. Others whispered that his family moved. No one knew for sure. But I knew. I knew he was still out there. Years later, I'm still in Seattle. I still work at the bookstore now as a manager. My life has settled into routines. Early mornings with coffee, long hours among shelves, quiet nights at home. On the outside, it looks like peace. But it isn't. I check my locks twice every night. I keep my curtains drawn. I avoid walking home alone after dark, because I can't shake the feeling that he hasn't really gone, that he's just waiting, watching from a distance, deciding when to step back into the light. Some people tell me I should move on, that he was just a college kid with a crush, but they didn't see what I saw in his eyes through that rain-streaked window. They didn't read the words he scrawled in the margins of my stolen notes. No one else gets you like I do. I've carried those words with me ever since. Obsession often hides behind politeness, charm, and the mask of being nice. Too often the warnings are ignored because the person doesn't fit society's idea of danger. But listening to your instincts is never wrong. If something feels off, speak up, protect yourself, and never let anyone convince you that your safety is an overreaction. Trusting your gut can be the difference between being silenced and being safe. I never thought I'd end up back on dating apps at 31. But the truth is, when you spend 3 years with someone and then watch it collapse overnight, loneliness creeps in fast. Chicago winters don't help either. The streets are gray and empty. The lake wind cuts through your bones, and even crowded coffee shops feel like they belong to everyone but you. That was my life in December of 2019. My name is Daniel Carter, and back then I was a software engineer who thought I had everything figured out. A good job, a steady girlfriend, and a plan for the future. When the relationship ended, the silence of my apartment grew unbearable. Even the hum of my computer didn't comfort me anymore. That's when I downloaded the app. It was called Matchpoint, one of those trendy new platforms that promised real connections instead of mindless swiping. I figured, what did I have to lose? At first, it was the usual. Profiles that didn't say much, short conversations that fizzled out after a day or two. But then there was her, Ella. Her first message was about an obscure indie band I hadn't heard anyone mention in years. "Do you still listen to the Paper Pilots?" she asked. My jaw nearly dropped. They were my high school obsession, a band I thought only a handful of us in the Midwest even remembered. I wrote back instantly. From there, it was like every conversation peeled away another coincidence. She quoted the same cult movies I loved, referenced old arcade games I'd wasted summers on, even admitted to drinking coffee out of oversized novelty mugs. I told myself it was rare, almost magical, to find someone who overlapped with me so perfectly. We started talking every night, long threads of messages, inside jokes piling up, even the occasional late-night call, though never video. Whenever I suggested FaceTime, she brushed it off. "I hate cameras, I look terrible on video, I'm too shy." I wanted to push, but I didn't. After the breakup, I craved someone to just be there. Ella filled the silence better than anyone else. At first, I didn't notice the details she dropped into conversation. Things like how I tapped my foot when I was nervous or the way my voice cracked late at night when I was tired. I assumed I'd told her more than I realized. When you're lonely, you overshare. At least that's what I told myself. It wasn't until the garlic incident that I felt the first real shiver of fear. It was a Thursday night. I'd just gotten home from work, snow clinging to my coat, the apartment warm from the radiator that barely worked. Cooking was my attempt at feeling normal again, so I'd put pasta water on the stove and tossed garlic into a pan. I was halfway through stirring when my phone buzzed. It was Ella. "Don't burn the garlic again." I froze. The wooden spoon nearly slipped from my hand. I hadn't told her I was cooking. I hadn't mentioned garlic. The last time I burned it was weeks ago, and that was a detail I'd never shared with anyone. My heart pounded. I typed back, "What do you mean?" She replied instantly, "Haha, just teasing. You told me once." But I knew I hadn't. Not ever. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying the moment, convincing myself it was some weird coincidence. Maybe she guessed. Maybe she was just joking. But the unease settled into me like the cold Chicago wind. The following week, everything escalated. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone in the dark. My eyelids grew heavy, the screen blurring. That's when the buzz came. A new message. From Ella. It was a photo of me, asleep, taken from the foot of my bed. I shot upright, the phone trembling in my hand. My apartment was silent, shadows stretching across the floor. I tore through the rooms, flipping lights on, throwing open closets, even yanking back the shower curtain. No one was there, but someone had been. The next morning I didn't go to work. Instead, I tore my apartment apart. Every shelf, every corner, every crevice. That's when I found it. A pinhole camera, no bigger than a shirt button, tucked neatly between the spines of books on my shelf. Another one hidden inside the vent in my living room. My chest tightened as I ripped them out, cords snapping. How long had they been there? How many nights had I been watched? I gathered them all in a shoebox, my hands shaking. By noon, I was standing inside the local police precinct, the shoebox clutched against my chest like a shield. The officer at the desk barely looked at me. "Dating apps sometimes." "Could be a scammer," he said. "Happens with no," I insisted. "She knows things she shouldn't know." She sent me a picture of myself, in bed. That means someone was in my apartment. The officer sighed, tapping at his keyboard. "Without proof linking it to her, there's not much we can do. Change your locks, get new passwords, stay alert." I wanted to scream. Proof? Wasn't this proof? But the look in his eyes told me everything. To him, I was just another paranoid guy from a dating app gone wrong. That night, I locked every window, double-checked the door, and sat in the dark with the shoebox beside me. My phone buzzed once. I didn't look. I couldn't. When I finally did, hours later, it was her. "Why didn't you answer?" I stopped eating in my apartment, stopped sleeping in my bed. I lived on takeout containers and restless nights on my couch, the shoebox of cameras always in sight. Friends noticed something was off. At work, my coworker Mike asked if I was sick. "Pale, man. You okay?" "You look," I lied. I said it was stress, deadlines, a stomach bug, anything but the truth. Because how do you explain that someone you've never met might be inside your walls? Ella didn't let up. If anything, she grew more demanding. Constant messages, questions about where I was, who I talked to, why I didn't answer fast enough. I stopped replying altogether, hoping silence would drive her away. One night around midnight, my phone buzzed with a single line. "Why are you ignoring me?" I didn't reply. An hour later, "You don't get it. We're perfect together." Another hour. "No one will love you like I do." By dawn, I had 30 unread messages. The final one made my skin crawl. "You're cuter when you're scared." I dropped the phone like it had burned me. My heart raced, bile rising in my throat. It wasn't just obsession anymore, it was delight. She wanted me terrified. By morning, I was gone. I packed a bag in under 10 minutes, just clothes, my laptop, my wallet, and bolted. I didn't tell work. I didn't tell friends. I checked into a hotel under a different name, using cash for the first time since college. In that hotel room, the silence was deafening. No hidden cameras, no buzz of notifications, just me, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was still watching somehow. I never went back to that apartment. Within a week, I terminated the lease. I bought a new phone, wiped every account, deleted every app. My landlord sent me an email about forwarding mail. I never replied. It's been years since then, but I still can't shake it. I don't date anymore. I don't download apps. I don't trust the coincidences people call chemistry. Because I know now that sometimes it isn't chemistry. Sometimes it's surveillance. Sometimes it's someone building themselves into your life without permission. And every time I see an unfamiliar number flash across my screen, every time I catch a shadow near my window, I wonder if it's her. If Ella is still out there. If she ever really left. Because the truth is, she knew too much. In a world where technology connects us instantly, it also opens the door for those who exploit it. Trust and connection should be earned through time and honesty, not built on stolen information or false intimacy. Protect your privacy, listen to your instincts, and remember, safety is worth more than the illusion of perfect compatibility. Real love never comes at the cost of your peace of mind. I used to believe that a house could fix everything. In 2002, I was 12 years old, and my family had just moved into what my parents called our dream home. To me, it looked like something from a commercial. 2 stories, white siding, shutters on the windows, and a pool glimmering in the backyard. My dad, Mark, was a high school teacher who had spent years picking up extra shifts, and my mom, Claire, worked part-time at a local dental office. They were so proud and we were so excited. My little brother, Ben, who was 9 at the time, said it was the kind of house rich kids on TV live in. For the first few months, it felt like magic. We had barbecues in the backyard. Mom finally got to host her summer parties, and Dad kept talking about how all his hard work had paid off. I biked through the neighborhood with new friends, and Ben cannonballed into the pool until his lips turned blue. It was everything my parents had promised. Safe, suburban, perfect. But perfection doesn't last. It started small. Mom would mention that she heard footsteps near the pool at night. Dad brushed it off. Probably a raccoon. Maybe kids from the neighborhood sneaking around. But one morning, Hannah's favorite stuffed rabbit, my stuffed rabbit, was floating in the pool. I never let go of that rabbit. It slept next to me every night. My stomach sank when I saw it bobbing in the water. Dad said maybe I'd left it outside. Maybe the wind carried it. I wanted to believe him, but I knew I hadn't. Then came the letters. The first one showed up in our mailbox on plain white paper. Beautiful family you have. Mom looked at it for a long time before folding it away. A week later, another one appeared. The girl looks like her mother. Dad tried to laugh it off, saying it was probably a weird prank, but I could see Mom wasn't laughing. The police were called, of course. They said unless the letters contained actual threats, there wasn't much they could do. That was the first time I realized adults don't always have answers, even when they act like they do. By October, the house didn't feel magical anymore. It felt watched. One evening, Dad came home and found the back door unlocked. Mom swore she had locked it. We searched the house together. Every room, every closet. Nothing was missing. But in the kitchen, the fruit bowl had been rearranged into a neat little pyramid. None of us did that. Mom's face went pale. Dad muttered something about her being forgetful, but I saw his hand shaking as he checked the locks again. The nights grew harder after that. I started noticing a man across the street near the lamppost. Always in a dark hoodie, never moving much, just standing there. I told Dad. He said it was probably a neighbor out for fresh air. But when I asked him why the man was there every night, he didn't answer. Ben began refusing to sleep without a nightlight. He claimed he saw shadows at his bedroom window. I didn't believe him until one night. I woke up to the sound of gravel crunching outside. I peeked through my blinds and saw the man in the hoodie standing at the edge of our yard facing my window. I backed away and crawled into bed, pulling the covers over my head. I didn't tell my parents that night. I was too scared of what they'd say or what they wouldn't. A week later, Mom found the Polaroid. It was late at night. Mom couldn't sleep, so she went downstairs for water. When she came back, her face was white as paper. She was clutching a photograph. She woke Dad first, then me. She showed us the picture. It was her, my mom, sleeping in bed. The sheets, the pillow, everything exactly as it had looked just hours earlier. Someone had taken it from inside the house. I will never forget the sound of my mother's voice when she whispered, "They were in here." We called the police again. They searched every door and window, no forced entry, no broken locks, nothing. One officer suggested maybe it was staged, maybe a prank. Mom broke down in tears. Dad demanded more patrols around the neighborhood. They promised, but their eyes told me they didn't believe us. After that, Dad installed extra locks and bought motion lights. He even set up a few cameras, though they never seemed to catch much. Whoever was watching us knew how to avoid being seen. The fear seeped into everything. I stopped inviting friends over. Ben started sleeping in my room. Mom jumped at every creak in the floorboards. And Dad, he pretended to be strong, but I could see how tired he looked, how angry he was at himself for not being able to stop it. The house we once loved had turned into something else. It didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like a cage with glass walls, every move we made visible to someone we couldn't see. The fall dragged on, heavy with dread. Every day felt like waiting for something worse to happen. I remember one night, hearing my parents argue in hushed voices. Mom wanted to leave. Dad insisted we couldn't give up the house he'd worked so hard for. "This is our home," he said. "I won't let someone drive us out." But Mom wasn't convinced. Neither was I. The man in the hoodie kept appearing, always across the street, always by that same lamppost. One night I worked up the courage to yank the blinds wide open and stare back. For a moment it felt like he was staring into me. Then he turned and walked away. That almost scared me more, that he didn't care I'd seen him. Around Halloween we found another Polaroid. This one was of Ben, asleep in his bed, clutching his nightlight. The picture had been left on the living room couch. Mom screamed when she found it. Dad tore through the house, searching every corner, every crawl space, nothing. That was the breaking point. In November we moved. It wasn't dramatic. No final confrontation, no police catching the stalker in the act. Just boxes packed in silence, a for sale sign hammered into the front lawn, and a family too exhausted to argue anymore. We left behind the pool, the yard, the dream. We traded it for a smaller, older house across town. It didn't matter. We just wanted to feel safe again. The stalker was never caught. I grew up, went to college, moved out of state, but the memory never left me. Even now, as an adult, whenever I pass by two-story suburban houses with backyard pools, my chest tightens. I think of the Polaroids. I think of how someone stood over us as we slept, snapping pictures, leaving them behind like trophies. And I think about how quickly safety can vanish, how the place that's supposed to protect you can betray you. The house wasn't safe. Maybe it never was. Home should be the one place where fear doesn't reach us. But safety isn't guaranteed by locks or walls alone. It requires vigilance, awareness, and trust in your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Never ignore the signs, because sometimes the greatest danger isn't outside your door. It's already inside. When I was 21, all I wanted was independence. After years of feeling trapped in my parents' house, my father strict to the point of suffocation, my mother distant like a ghost, I couldn't wait to move out. In 2018, I finally did. I split rent with 3 friends in a small rented house in Portland, Oregon. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. My room was the smallest, tucked away on the ground floor. A single window faced the backyard, which my friends thought was depressing, but I didn't mind. That window gave me easy access to my little escape. After long days of classes and studying psychology, I'd slip outside at night for a cigarette. The porch light bathed the yard in a tired orange glow, and I'd sit in a wobbly wooden chair listening to the hum of the city muffled by distance. It was the one part of the day that felt entirely mine. That's where I first noticed him, the man next door. At first, he didn't seem threatening, just strange. He looked to be in his mid-30s, tall, messy dark hair with this habit of appearing at odd hours. Midnight watering of plants, standing at his fence with no purpose, and always, his eyes lingering a little too long when I lit my cigarette. One night he spoke. His voice startled me out of my quiet haze. "You shouldn't smoke so much," he called softly. "It ruins your smile." I forced a laugh, stubbed out the cigarette, and muttered a quick thanks before going inside. My heart thudded faster than it should have. I told myself he was just awkward, maybe lonely. But deep down, something in me recoiled. It wasn't until weeks later that I learned from one of my roommates that he'd gotten into a fight with his old flatmates. The cops had been called, apparently. "Guy's got a temper," she whispered. I nodded, not saying much. But from then on, every time I stepped outside, I felt his presence like a shadow pressing against me. It was broad daylight when he first cornered me. I was walking to the bus stop, earbuds in, but no music playing. A trick I used when I didn't want strangers to bother me. I noticed him trailing me a few steps behind, pretending to scroll through his phone. My stomach twisted, then he closed the gap. "Hey," he said, his smile too wide, too sure. "Saw you at the cafe yesterday. You looked beautiful with your hair down." I froze. I hadn't told anyone I'd been at that cafe. He must have followed me. I pulled my jacket tighter. "Please stop watching me," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. His smile twitched, faltering for just a second, then he tilted his head. "I'm not watching, I'm just noticing." I walked away quickly, pulse hammering in my ears. That night, when I came home, he was sitting on our doorstep, a plastic grocery bag beside him filled with beer cans. "Thought I'd wait," he said casually, like it was normal. I ducked back inside and called my roommate Jason, whispering into the phone. "He's here. He's right outside." Jason sighed, half annoyed. He's probably drunk. Don't overthink it. I'll be back in an hour." An hour. It might as well have been forever. I stayed hidden by my window, peeking through the blinds. He sat there sipping beer, muttering to himself, glancing at the door like he knew I was watching. Only after nearly an hour did he stumble off with another man from his house. When he was gone, I rushed out to lock the gate, checking every bolt twice. My hands shook so badly I could hardly turn the key. For a few days, things were quiet. I started to wonder if maybe it had been a one-off. Maybe I'd exaggerated it in my head. I wanted so badly to believe that. Then came the scratching. It was around 3 in the morning when I woke up. At first, I thought it was just a branch against the glass, but the sound was deliberate, too slow. Scratch, pause, scratch. My chest tightened. I turned my head just enough to glance at the blinds. Through the slats, a shadow crouched outside my window. I didn't move. I didn't scream. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed Jason. When he answered groggy, I whispered, "He's at my window." Jason groaned. It's probably a raccoon. Go back to bed." Tears welled up, but I stayed silent, frozen in place, listening to the scratching until finally it stopped. I lay awake until sunrise, clutching the phone to my chest. The next morning, when I stepped outside, muddy footprints trailed beneath my window. Human footprints. I showed them to my roommates. No one said much. We called the police. They listened politely, took a few notes, and left me with the same useless advice. Stay alert. Don't be alone with him. I wanted to scream. Staying alert didn't stop muddy footprints. From that night on, I stopped smoking outside. I shut my blinds tight. I walked with headphones in, music blasting to drown out the sound of my own heartbeat. I never left the house alone unless I knew my roommates would be home when I got back. But the fear didn't stay contained to the house. It followed me everywhere. At the grocery store, I'd feel eyes on me. On the bus, I'd catch sight of dark hair a few rows back. Sometimes I couldn't tell if it was him or just my imagination, but that didn't matter. The fear was the same. Jason tried to reassure me. Look, Em, if he does something serious, the cops will get involved. Until then, don't let him get in your head. But he was already in my head. Every creak in the night, every rustle by the window, every unfamiliar footstep outside, I felt him. One evening, I came home to find a beer can sitting neatly on the porch. No note, no explanation, just the can upright, waiting. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. That night, I slept in Jason's room with the door locked. By spring, I couldn't take it anymore. My friends thought I was being dramatic, but I didn't care. I broke the lease early, packed my things, and left Portland. I told them I needed a fresh start, that the city wasn't for me. The truth was simpler. I couldn't live in constant fear. I couldn't keep waiting for the next scrape at the window or the next shadow on the porch. I moved across town to a small apartment. The walls were thin, the neighborhood noisy, but it didn't matter. For the first time in months, I slept with the blinds open just a crack, to remind myself I had nothing to hide. But the fear didn't leave. Even now, years later in a different city, I wake up sometimes at 3 a.m., heart racing, convinced I can hear scratching at my window. I tell myself it's just a dream, just memory. But deep down, I know the truth. Once you've lived with someone standing at your door, watching, waiting, you never really forget it. Evil doesn't always wear a mask or hide in the dark. Sometimes it lives next door, disguised as a neighbor, excused as awkwardness, dismissed as harmless. But unease is a warning, not an overreaction. Trust your instincts, set boundaries, and never let anyone convince you that fear is just in your head. Your safety is worth believing in even when others. I used to think of the woods as freedom. Since high school, Derek and I had made it a tradition. Every winter, we'd pack up our gear, hike into the forest, and spend a few nights cut off from the world. No phones buzzing, no city noise, no obligations. Just the sound of wind through the trees and the crackle of fire on cold nights. By 2013, I was 24, working full-time at an auto repair shop. My days bled together. Oil-stained uniforms, the buzz of fluorescent lights, hands raw from grease and cold metal. Derek was a year older, just starting as a park ranger assistant. His life the opposite of mine. Outdoors, fresh air, the kind of job he had always dreamed of. When he suggested keeping the tradition alive that winter, I agreed without hesitation. I didn't know it then, but that trip would be the last. We parked the truck at the trailhead mid-afternoon, the sky already pale with winter light. Snow crunched beneath our boots as we hauled gear through the woods. Derek moved with ease, adjusting his pack like he was born for this. I lagged behind, watching our breath rise in thin clouds. That's when I noticed the footprints. They weren't ours. Bigger, fresh, leading the same way we were headed. Hunters, probably, Derek said when I pointed it out. His tone was casual, but his eyes flickered over the prints a little too long. I tried to shake it off. The forest was public land. Of course, other people used it. Still, I couldn't ignore the feeling of being led somewhere, like we were walking a path already chosen for us. By the time we set up camp, the sky was bruised purple. The fire sputtered to life, and for a while, everything felt familiar again. Roasting hot dogs, telling dumb stories about high school, laughing at jokes that had long stopped being funny but still felt comforting. The woods, in those moments, felt like they always had. Ours. Until the scream. It sliced through the night, sharp and human. I froze mid-bite, my hot dog falling into the snow. "Tell me that was an animal," I whispered. Derek forced a laugh, but it cracked at the edges. Cougar, maybe. They scream like people sometimes. But I knew. My gut told me. That wasn't an animal. That was someone. The fire suddenly felt too small, too fragile against the dark pressing in around us. We tried to shake it off, to pretend it was nothing. But minutes later came another sound. Footsteps in the snow. Heavy, deliberate, not close, but close enough. "Grab the knife," Derek muttered, his voice tight. I pulled out the small hunting knife we always carried, suddenly aware of how useless it felt in my hand. I swallowed hard. "Hello?" I called, my voice breaking. "Anyone out there?" Silence. The woods seemed to lean in, holding its breath. Derek grabbed a flashlight. "Let's check it out. Better to know than sit here waiting." Every step away from the fire felt wrong. My boots crunched against the snow, the beam of light cutting through tree trunks and branches like pale bones. 50 yards from camp we found it. A deer carcass, ripped open, blood freezing against the snow. I gagged, pulling my scarf over my mouth. Jesus. But what made my stomach twist wasn't the deer. It was the boot prints around it. Not hunting tracks, not quick. Just circles. Like someone had stood there watching. Derek swung the light toward the trees. And that's when I saw him. A man. He wasn't hiding. Wasn't moving. Just standing among the pines, staring at us. He wore no hunting gear, no bright jacket. Just dark clothes that swallowed the light. "Hey!" Derek shouted, his voice shaking. "What the hell are you doing out here?" The man didn't answer. Didn't flinch. Just watched. I felt cold down to my bones. "We need to go. Now." We stumbled back to camp, throwing our gear into bags with clumsy hands. All the while, footsteps echoed beyond the firelight, circling us. We didn't run, not yet, but panic had already set its claws in. Packing up felt endless. My fingers were clumsy with fear, fumbling at frozen zippers and straps. Derek shoved the last bag into my arms. "Move," he hissed. We doused the fire, the sudden darkness making my stomach lurch. Only our flashlights cut through the black, beams bouncing wildly as we hurried toward the trail. Behind us, the crunch of footsteps followed. He wasn't trying to be quiet. Whoever he was, he wanted us to know he was there. "Don't look back," Derek said. His voice was low, urgent. But I did. A shape moved between the trees, not close enough to see his face, but close enough to know he was keeping pace. My chest burned. Every breath came out ragged. I clutched the knife like it could save me, though I knew it couldn't. We didn't talk, didn't dare. Just the rhythm of our boots pounding snow, the hiss of our breath, and the steady, taunting echo of his steps. By the time the truck came into view, I thought I might collapse. Relief surged through me. Safety, warmth, an escape. But as we reached the driver's side, Derek stopped dead. My eyes followed his. On the windshield, scrawled with a finger in the condensation, were the words, "You shouldn't have come." The world tilted. My stomach dropped. Derek swore under his breath, fumbling for the keys. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped my flashlight. We threw ourselves into the truck. Doors slammed. The engine roared to life. And still, the woods loomed around us, silent now, as if they had swallowed him whole. The drive home was silent. Derek's hands gripped the wheel so tight his knuckles went white. My own hands wouldn't stop shaking. The knife still clutched in my lap, though I knew it was useless now. Neither of us looked back. Neither of us wanted to see if he was still there. When we finally pulled into my driveway, Derek shut off the engine and just sat there. Neither of us moved. The only sound was the ticking of the cooling engine. "What the hell was that?" I whispered. Derek shook his head, eyes fixed straight ahead. "Doesn't matter. We're not talking about it." But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The scream, the deer, the man, the words on the windshield. That night I tried to sleep, but every creak of the house sounded like footsteps in the snow. Every shadow in my room looked like him, standing, watching. The next morning I called Derek. We need to tell someone. The cops, rangers, somebody. He cut me off. And tell them what? That we saw a guy in the woods? They'll laugh us out of the station. But he wrote on the truck, wipe it off. Forget it happened. His voice was sharp, final. So I tried, but forgetting isn't the same as healing. Months passed. Winter faded into spring, then summer. Life returned to normal, or at least it looked like it did. I went back to work, greasy hands under fluorescent lights. Derek kept his ranger job, posting pictures of hikes online, smiling like nothing had ever happened. But we never went camping again. I couldn't. The thought of a tent, a fire, the woods pressing in, it made my chest tighten until I couldn't breathe. I stopped hiking, stopped fishing, stopped everything that reminded me of that night. Derek tried once to convince me to go again. It was just some crazy guy, he said. It won't happen again. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the way he avoided looking at me. He was as scared as I was. Even now, years later, I still hear it sometimes. That scream. Not in dreams, not in nightmares, just in the quiet moments when the world is still. It echoes in the back of my mind, sharp and human, reminding me of what we saw. And I know this much. Freedom isn't found in the woods anymore, only fear. Only... The wild can feel like freedom, but it also hides what we're not ready to face. Dangers aren't always animals or storms. Sometimes they are people, drawn to isolation, where no one can hear you if you scream. Trust your instincts, respect your fear, and never ignore the signs that tell you something isn't right. Survival isn't just about strength. It's about knowing when to walk away,